All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust Television. It's now time for the second discussion on the program this morning. Now, credit rating agency Augusto & Co. has said Nigeria's foreign debt could rise from about 15 trillion to 18 trillion naira if the Central Bank of Nigeria devalues the naira at 20%. The firm, in its economic newsletter for January 2022 edition, said Nigeria has assumed a tighter foreign exchange policy stance since 2015, and this has been elevated since 2020 to date, as was the case in the recent First Monetary Policy Committee for 2022. Now, according to the report, a tighter forex stance has been characterized by political interference and demand management amidst a weaker supply of the US dollar in the foreign exchange market. Now, to give us perspectives on this, we have an economist and lecturer from Bayes University here in Abuja, Professor Mukhtar Imam. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, welcome on the show. When you talk about, Nigeria's currency today, a lot of people express concern as to the rate at which, the Naira is losing its value, day by day. We've seen days that the Naira was just 100 plus, also gradually to about 200, and then later, and now we are talking about 500 Naira. Only God knows in the next few months what's going to happen. Is the central bank helpless, in terms of controlling, the value of our Naira?
The central bank has a significant role to play in terms of designing monetary policies that would strengthen the position of the local currency. But not all of the responsibility of ensuring that the currency is strengthened lies with the CBN. But like you said, I think there have been a lot of policy somersaults within the Apex Bank that have not been very helpful in terms of strengthening the value of the Naira. For example, we're talking about the foreign exchange. The problem with the Forex basically started when the CBN, in its wisdom or lack of it, decided to shift stance as far as foreign exchange regimes are concerned. Now, in Nigeria, over the years, there are basically two types of foreign exchange regimes. You either have the pegged, which is basically the rigid, or you have the flexible, which is the floating. The central bank decided to move from the rigid to semi-rigid. Now, the problem with assuming a neutral position in that is that you overnight create artificial billionaires, because you have people within the Forex market who are waiting for that opportunity, right, to explore the system, to manipulate the system. And that was exactly what we saw happen when the CBN decided to move its stance from the rigid to the semi-rigid. It wasn't the floating. We did not move from the rigid to the floating. Now, the problem with that is the moment you do that, you create a shock in the market. It is like humans. Today, we have been told that there's COVID, right? And as a result of the fear factor, which is a natural response you have to any situation you have no understanding about, you begin to, there's that, that's the human nature of self-preservation, of survival begins to kick in, and then you put on a mask. This is exactly what happens to the market. Volatility hits and the market responds. Now, that policy wasn't very helpful. And quite frankly, the reason is very simple. You had people in the commercial banks who were connivers with directors in the CBN. And my position was clear, or a lot of individuals' position and scholars and analysts was clear, that the broom needed to visit the CBN at the time. Because what you had happening, including the former Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido, he talked about this a number of times. Now, you're moving the Forex regime overnight without putting in place measures that will ensure that there's a flow, there's the availability of Forex. And then you have allowed people who have the Forex in their hands to hoard, thereby starving the market, thereby starving people who, for example, are manufacturers and require the Forex to bring in certain products or certain manufacturing equipment to be able to serve the economy. And so we had a lot of billionaires being created overnight at that time. And this is exactly what is still going on till today. A classical example, or rather another instance in line with the conversation would be when we had the currency swap. And we were talking about including the renminbi, the Chinese currency, right, the yuan, into foreign exchange trade and so on and so forth. At the time, what happened? We still had people who were saboteurs in the system who would go around, buy the yuan, claiming they're going to China for trade, remain in this country, turn around, turn it into dollar, and then sell to the market.
Okay.
And so when you go to the commercial banks, they tell you, go to the black market, please. Because you have, the reality is this, the bank execs of the commercial banks are conniving with directors in the CBN, and a lot of them own the foreign exchange.
Okay.
And so this is the situation.
So now, if the CBN eventually devalues the Naira at 20%, wouldn't we be heading for economic bewilderness in some sort?
Well, for me, I am not a fan of devaluation. I've never been a fan of devaluation. We have devalued, what, 11, 12 times in this country? What result has that given to us? Remember when Lagarde was still the country rep of IMF and visited the country, she told the president a number of things that she assumed were challenges to the Nigerian system. And part of the things she talked about was devaluation. Devaluation has not really helped, and it will not help. And part of the reason, or the simple reason why devaluation is not going to help at this point in time, is because we're still at that point where, regardless of what the CBN and the central government is doing, we're still import dependent. This is just the reality. Our economy is still dollarized. We still haven't moved from that, because a lot of the things that we have around here, take the Abuja breakfast, for example, 60% to 80% of it is imported. And that's why my conclusion or submission about this is that our blood is also imported. So basically, it goes to tell you, you see, the consumption rate of imported goods are high. We are still not being able to match. We have just talked about this. The Bloomberg and the IMF released a report a few weeks ago and said that, that revealed that food inflation has risen to what? 16% in this country. This is a country that has 60% of the world's arable land. I did not say Nigeria's land is 60% arable. 60% of the world's arable land, implying that we can feed the world. Yet, we are faced with food scarcity. There's a shortage of food in this country. And yet, you expect that devaluing your currency is going to do any good. No, it's not going to do any good. You devalue your currency where you have significant goods for export, where you can match the international market, you can flood the international market with goods. Then you devalue your currency. This is what the Chinese are doing, and this is what has created the currency war between the United States and the Chinese. Because what happens is, when you have a lot of goods and people patronize from outside, you devalue your currency, it sort of saturates the market and allows you to have some balance, because you would have a lot of influx, people coming in to purchase. What are we exporting? Crude oil and corruption. Nobody's going to buy corruption. Crude oil, the world is already saturated with crude. Look what happened in the days of COVID, when COVID was at its peak, right? There was a downward curve in the demand and supply curve for oil, because the market was saturated.
But in the past few days, we've seen an increase in the price of, crude, globally.
Yes, no doubt about that.
Yeah, so are we making the most of it, in your opinion?
Well, I think we, at this point, it will only be fair to say that we have made some significant strides. I mean, look at, when you look at our our external reserve, for example, it has placed Nigeria as the largest economy on the African continent, which is a good indicator. Take, for example, when we're talking about the ECO, right? Trying to create a single currency for the West African sub-region. Part of the condition was that you must have an external reserve that can be a shock absorber. In the event investors come in and things fail, they know they have something to fall back on. So that is a very good indicator. It tells foreign investors that we are a serious economy. So basically, we have been able to save, no doubt about that. We have been able also to invest some of that proceeds into infrastructural development. There's no doubt about that. There are a good number of infrastructural projects going on here and there, even though I still feel that infrastructural projects or capital projects must be looked at from the realm of short, medium, and long term. Most of the investments we have in infrastructure today are basically long term, and these are things that have a long premium yield period. And Nigerians are not concerned about the macro; they want the micro, food, immediate results,
like sharp.
So with all of these challenges that we are facing, do you think there's something wrong with our monetary policy?
Yeah, I think there are challenges with our monetary policies, but beyond the monetary policies, I think, you see, the thing is this, that you have to have a monetary and fiscal policy that complements one another. Without all of that, no matter how brilliant your monetary policies look or assume to look, you would have challenges in either the medium or long term. And these are some of the challenges we're being faced with. Currently, we're talking about these monetary policies that are either mismatching or flip-flopping, yet we have the the challenges of insecurity, right? We're talking about an inflation in food prices, and the reason is very simple. 40,000 hectares of land in northern Nigeria have been abandoned, and this has been conservative with the figure. Imagine you abandoning 40,000 hectares of land that will provide food for people. And what's the reason? Simple: insecurity. People can no longer go to their farms, they're running away, and so on and so forth. So until we're able to address some of these fiscal issues, our monetary policies, no matter how good they look, might not necessarily augur well. And this is the reason why we're stuck where we are. Again, these are part of the things that have affected debt. For example, you find that our debt profile is going, it's ballooning, right? It's all a part of what we're talking about here, a mismatch in the monetary policies. But then again, of course, the fiscal issues. You must look at unemployment, you must look at infrastructural development, and so on and so forth. I think in the short run, these things could fix the situation.
Now, do you think that there is some kind of political interference when it comes to the way we are managing our forex? In Nigeria, the elites, for instance, some of them do not even trade in, they don't have anything to do with the Naira. It's about hard currencies, either pounds or dollars and all of that. So when you look at that, do you consider that as a problem to us?
It is. It's a huge challenge. It's one of the most significant challenges that we're being faced with. You see, that's why I talked about the dollarized Nigerian economy. Yes, there's no doubt. Virtually all economies around the world are dollarized, because when you look at the external reserves of the sovereign wealth fund of virtually all the countries, including the largest economy in the world, China, right? That sounds unconventional, cool? China, when you ask what is the external reserve of China, you still hear $500 billion. So at the end of the day, virtually all economies, and this is because there is an international financial oligarchy. And the US dollar, of course, because it's the only resource the US has, it must protect what it has. And so to trade in the international market, it has to be in the dollar. So yes, there is that aspect, that dynamic around the dollar. But the reality is this, that when your domestic economy becomes so dollar dependent, take out the dollar and the Naira today and go to your child's school to pay school fees, and be rest assured the principal or the cashier is going to reach for the dollar first. This is the irony of where we are. We find that, you see, so that flair, the love, the push for the dollar has basically crippled our currency. And there is also the problem. There's a social problem to this. You see, economists like to always look at figure. But we must understand that there are sociological issues to whatever conversation we're having around the economy as well. And it is about mindset, it's about the thought process of individuals within that society. If we do not fix our thought process and our mindset, and the social psychological conditioning of the average Nigerian person continues along the dimension where it is, i.e. lack of patriotism, i.e. indiscipline, which is a part of what Lagarde talked about when she met the president. She said, Mr. President, your people are a bunch of indisciplined lot. Nigerians reach for a jugular vein without looking at the message, but the reality is what it is. So basically, when you look at all of that, vis-a-vis our drive, push for the dollar, it becomes a problem. Our elites, like you rightly mentioned, would rather stash the dollar somewhere because they feel it's a foreign and hard currency and it has more value than the Naira, thereby devaluing our own currency. Because believe in you me, if we were to ransack the houses of elites and push out all the dollar saved somewhere, well, this is an assumption, but because we're within the realm of assumption,
yeah, but we've heard stories. I mean, we live among people.
Exactly. So when we push out all this dollar, say for example, there's a convention going on. I didn't say so. And we're able to push out all the dollar into circulation. Trust me, the value of the dollar will crash within the shortest period of time. But we have people who sit on them and then starve manufacturers, starve people who are processing, starve people who are producing.
Who actually need them, actually,
exactly.
for the
and
common
so,
good.
Exactly. And so this becomes a huge challenge, and it is not very helpful. And then on the flip side, you have people who are also living on imported goods. They feed on pizza. You remember the former Minister of Agriculture said this, that people import pizza. British Airways bring pizza to the country.
Okay.
So when you look around this, you would find that these are some of the challenges that we're being faced with, you know, at that micro level. But then there are also macro level issues that must be fixed, and that's the responsibility of government at all levels. Often at times the misconception is focusing attention on the central government alone. The state governments are as much to blame, if not much more to blame, as the central government is. Because, of course, these are the people who are assumed to be nearer to the people. And these are the people who sit on their thrones like demigods and emperors and refuse to do anything. Imagine a governor giving people who won cutlasses in 2020 and 21 to go to the farm. How do you expect that that venture is going to be lucrative enough for anybody who intends to go into farming?
Or wheelbarrows. I recall that too.
Oh my.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
We have to end the discussion here. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you for having me.
We really, I mean,
Quite
it's very
interesting.
Yes. For those who are just joining, I think you've missed, but you can always catch up, you know, on our YouTube and also on our social media platform. We've been speaking with an economist and also a lecturer from Bayes University, and he's a Professor Mukhtar Imam here. Thank you again.
I hope to call you next time.
I will be here. Brilliant.
All right, with that, we've come to the end of the show for today. It's been quite interesting. Insecurity and economy. I mean, these are two things that cannot be separated, is it?
Cannot be overemphasized. Very, very important.
All right. So join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Bye for now.
And I'm Zainab Bala. See you tomorrow.